There is a reason you feel different, a reason you feel isolated even in crowded rooms, a reason people misunderstand your silence and quietly fear your depth. And that reason is not weakness or social failure, but design, because you were never meant to blend in, never designed to be easily understood, never shaped for comfort or approval, but engineered through pressure, loss, and endurance to survive what would have destroyed others long ago. And if you are watching this right now, it is not by coincidence or algorithmic chance. It is because your soul has already walked through shadows most people never encounter, and still you stand, still you breathe, still you observe the world with eyes sharpened by experience rather than illusion. And you may have wondered why friendships faded without explanation, why family members could never quite reach you, why love seemed distant, delayed, or entirely absent. But hear this carefully, chosen one. Your loneliness was not abandonment. It was protection, divine and intentional, because the season you were placed in required isolation for refinement, not companionship for comfort. And the darkness you were forced to navigate did not corrupt your light. It guarded it, sharpened it, taught it discernment, because unguarded light attracts parasites, while guarded light becomes power, and even angels stepped back, not out of fear of you, but out of respect for the force you were becoming. Because what you carry is not fragile. It is dangerous to the wrong hands and sacred to the right timing. And before we continue, type "I am chosen" in the comments as an act of acknowledgement. Like this video so the message is not buried beneath distraction, and subscribe because truth has a way of returning exactly when you are ready to hear it. Now take a breath and feel the stillness you have grown used to, because that stillness was your training ground. Now let us go deeper into why your solitude was necessary, why your darker traits were allowed to form, and why the divine kept you separate while others lived ordinary lives. Your solitude taught you self-reliance, your silence taught you observation, your emotional restraint taught you mastery, and your so-called darkness, your intensity, your boundaries, your refusal to beg for validation, was not evil but armor, because chosen ones are not shaped through ease but through controlled pressure, and spiritual mechanics do not operate on fairness but on readiness. Separation creates clarity, isolation builds discernment, and delayed connection preserves destiny. So understand this. You were not hidden because you were weak. You were hidden because you were valuable. Not delayed because you were forgotten, but delayed because timing matters when power is involved. And now that you are awakening to this truth, the loneliness begins to transform, not into bitterness, but into understanding, because you were never alone. You were being prepared. Point 1.1. Your isolation was a filter, not a punishment. At some moment in your life, usually after a series of quiet disappointments, you began to notice a pattern that felt both subtle and unsettling. People did not leave you loudly. They did not announce their exits or slam doors behind them. They simply drifted. Messages slowed. Invitations stopped. Familiar voices grew distant. And in the silence that followed, your mind searched for explanations. You asked yourself whether you had changed too much, whether you had become too serious, too inward, too difficult to understand. But this separation was not the result of failure. It was the result of refinement. In nature, valuable substances are filtered repeatedly. Gold is passed through fire. Water is purified through layers. Access is restricted not to punish the precious, but to preserve it. Your isolation was a spiritual filtration process. The divine removed you from environments that demanded conformity, because your destiny required clarity. Had you remained surrounded by constant noise, your inner signal would have been distorted. Growth does not occur in crowded spaces. Transformation requires stillness. This is why your life slowed down while others seemed busy. This is why your calendar emptied while others filled theirs. You were being placed in a controlled environment where your true frequency could stabilize. Solitude was not emptiness, it was preparation, and the longer it lasted, the more precise the calibration became. Point 2c. 2. Your dark side was a divine defense system. There is a side of you that developed quietly, without instruction, without permission, forged not in rebellion, but in observation. It is the part of you that watches before it speaks, that listens before it trusts, that stays composed when others attempt to provoke a reaction. This side learned to read the room, to sense shifts in energy, and to feel danger long before it announced itself. It was shaped by lived experience, not malice, by repetition rather than resentment. Early on, you noticed that blind openness invited exploitation, that constant availability drained something vital from your spirit. So your psyche adapted the only way it could. Your emotional intelligence sharpened, your perception widened, your awareness became layered. What others casually label as darkness is not cruelty or suspicion, but discernment. You learned that not everyone deserves access to your inner world, and that wisdom taught you to ration your energy with intention. This was never bitterness. It was intelligence earned through pattern recognition. You noticed who gave and who only took. You noticed who respected boundaries and who tested them. Over time, your nervous system learned restraint, and your spirit learned containment. Your darker traits are not destructive impulses. They are protective structures. They form a perimeter around your light, a necessary barrier that prevents your compassion from being endlessly extracted by those who offer nothing in return. Without this edge, your empathy would have been consumed, your kindness turned into currency for others to spend freely. Your silence is not emptiness, it is calibration. Your distance is not rejection, it is self-governance. Your restraint is not coldness, it is discipline, and discipline is a spiritual skill rarely understood by those who live without boundaries. The divine does not strip chosen souls of their defenses. It does not demand naivety in the name of purity. Instead, it allows protection to form organically, through experience, through awareness, and through hard-earned clarity. Light that survives learns how to shield itself. Strength that lasts knows when to remain still. You did not lose softness, you preserved it. You did not become darker, you became precise. What you carry now is not fear, but balance. Not armor born of hatred, but structure born of wisdom. Your inner shadow does not block your light. It ensures it endures in a world that often feeds on it, without gratitude or care. Point 3. Why you feel lonely even when you are strong. Strength changes the architecture of connection in ways most people never consciously experience, because when you learn to regulate your emotions internally, you no longer reach outward for validation, reassurance, or emotional rescue. You stop outsourcing your stability to the moods, approval, or presence of others. Silence no longer feels threatening because your nervous system has learned safety from within. As this happens, superficial bonds begin to lose their grip, not through conflict or rejection, but through irrelevance. Conversations built on noise, distraction, and emotional trading start to feel hollow, and without forcing anything, you naturally step back. This creates a unique kind of loneliness, one that can feel confusing at first because it does not come from loss, abandonment, or lack. It comes from subtraction. Something unnecessary has fallen away. You are no longer surrounded by people, yet you are not empty. In fact, You are fuller than before, but filled with something quieter and deeper. This inner space exists because you have outgrown dependency, and dependency is the invisible glue holding most relationships together. Many connections survive not because of alignment, but because of shared wounds, shared fears, shared neediness, or mutual distraction from unresolved inner chaos. When you no longer require constant emotional exchange to feel grounded, those dynamics dissolve on their own. This does not make you cold, detached, or superior. It makes you integrated. Evolution always feels like isolation before it feels like alignment, because the old environment cannot support the new structure you are becoming. The loneliness you feel is not evidence of something wrong. It is evidence of transition. It is the pause between versions of self, where the old attachments have released, but the new resonant connections have not yet arrived. This space is not punishment. It is preparation. Your loneliness is the quiet field where purpose gathers, where your thoughts become clearer, your intuition sharper, and your sense of direction less influenced by noise. In this stillness, you begin to hear your own rhythm instead of reacting to the rhythms of others. Though it may feel heavy at times, this loneliness is not a void demanding to be filled. It is capacity forming. It is room being made for depth instead of distraction, for alignment instead of attachment, and for presence instead of performance. What feels like emptiness is actually structural strength taking shape. And once you recognize that, the loneliness no longer defines you. It becomes the foundation you stand on. Point 4. Why people project onto you. You have likely noticed how quickly people decide who you are, often within moments, without evidence and without conversation. They attach meanings to your silence, motives to your calm, and intentions to your restraint. They speak about you as if they have access to your inner world, when in truth they are only encountering their own unexamined thoughts. This is projection in its purest form. When someone has not confronted their insecurities, their fears, or their unmet desires, they look outward for a surface onto which they can place them. Your presence becomes that surface, not because you provoke, but because you do not perform. You do not chase validation, and that absence of seeking unsettles those who are still dependent on external approval. You do not rush to explain yourself, and that composure exposes the chaos in those who feel compelled to justify every move. Because you are self-contained, you remind others of what they have not yet developed within themselves. Because you are emotionally regulated, you highlight the instability they have normalized. This contrast is uncomfortable, and discomfort demands an explanation. Rather than look inward, people create a story about you. Neutrality becomes arrogance in their narrative. Boundaries become coldness. Silence becomes superiority. They are not responding to your actions. They are responding to the internal dialogue your presence triggers. You represent independence in a world that rewards dependence. You represent restraint in a culture addicted to reaction. And when someone cannot access these qualities themselves, they experience your existence as judgment, even when none is given. This is why you are misunderstood without confrontation and criticized without cause. It is easier to label you than to question themselves. Understand this clearly. You're not obligated to correct every false perception. You're not required to soften your stillness to make others comfortable. What they see in you is filtered through their own unresolved lens. You are not the source of their discomfort. You are the reflection of it. And a mirror does not defend itself against the image staring back. Point 5. Even angels respect your path. Some lives are guided through constant intervention, while others are guided through restraint, and you belong to the second category, the kind of soul that was not shaped by rescue but by reality, not by repeated saving but by deliberate exposure to consequence and cause, because your growth required direct experience rather than constant correction. And this is why help so often arrived after endurance instead of before it. Not because you were forgotten, delayed, or overlooked, but because you were trusted. Trusted to survive the pressure, trusted to extract meaning from difficulty, and trusted to integrate lessons without needing them softened or diluted. This was never neglect, even when it felt like abandonment, even when silence echoed louder than reassurance, because the divine does not interfere with souls that are capable of internal alignment, and you were recognized early as someone who could self-calibrate under strain. You were allowed to struggle because struggle refined your internal compass, sharpening your sense of direction when no external signposts were available. And you were allowed to doubt because doubt forced you to search inward instead of outsourcing certainty. You were trusted with silence because silence develops discernment, teaching you to hear what is real rather than what is loud, to recognize truth without applause, and to stand steady without constant confirmation. This path was never designed to be easier, only clearer, because ease produces dependency while precision produces mastery, and precision is reserved for those who can carry it without becoming rigid or bitter. Each delay trained patience, each unanswered moment strengthened perception, and each stretch of isolation taught you how to remain whole without external reinforcement. While others were redirected at every wrong turn, you were allowed to walk deeper into your choices so you could understand their architecture, their weight, and their consequence, and in doing so, you developed an internal authority that cannot be shaken by circumstance or opinion. You were not spared because sparing would have weakened the muscles you were meant to use later, the discernment you would need when guidance became subtle, and the steadiness required when others would look to you for clarity. What felt like distance was calibration. What felt like absence was preparation. And what felt like silence was instruction without language. This path demanded more from you because more was already within you. And the restraint you experienced was not withdrawal, but respect, the kind given only to souls capable of walking forward without being carried, integrating pain into wisdom, and emerging not dependent but precise. Point 6. Why love comes late for the chosen one. Love is delayed in your life because love is not a simple addition. It is a multiplier, and whatever it touches grows stronger, louder, and more demanding. The wrong connection would not have merely distracted you. It would have amplified the wrong direction entirely. You are not someone who loves halfway. You bond deeply, you invest fully, and you pour presence, loyalty, and emotional intelligence into the people you choose. That depth is rare, and because it is rare, it cannot be wasted on misalignment. This is why relationships ended without dramatic collapse, without clear villains, and without obvious mistakes. They ended not because you failed, but because timing protected you. You were being kept free from emotional entanglements that would have slowly redirected your energy away from the path you were meant to walk. Some connections would have consumed your focus. Others would have required you to explain yourself endlessly. Some would have made you smaller without you even realizing it. So they dissolved, quietly, precisely. You may have questioned yourself in those moments, wondering why love seemed just out of reach, why it arrived with intensity but could not stay. But absence was not rejection. It was calibration. It was alignment, in progress. While others learned through attachment, you were learning through refinement. You were learning discernment, boundaries, self-trust, and emotional sovereignty. You were being shaped into someone whose purpose could not be negotiated away for comfort. When love finally arrives, it will not compete with your mission. It will not ask you to choose. It will recognize what you carry before you even explain it. It will feel familiar, not because you have known it before, but because it resonates with who you have become. It will not demand that you shrink your vision, your voice, or your pace. It will expand alongside you, moving with you rather than pulling you off course. The delay was not punishment. It was preservation. It was the universe refusing to let something sacred be diluted. Every season of solitude was sharpening your clarity. Every ending was closing a door that would have led you somewhere lesser. Love was not absent. It was waiting until it could arrive without costing you yourself. Point 7. Integrating your darkness and your light. The final realization is this: your darkness and your light were never meant to be separated. They were forged together through experience, pressure, loss, observation, and deep inner reckoning. Your light gives compassion, the ability to see suffering without turning away, to understand motives without excusing harm, and to offer grace without self-erasure. Your darkness gives boundaries, the instinct that says, enough, the quiet firmness that does not need to explain itself, and the internal authority that recognizes when empathy must end and self-respect must begin. Together they create balance, not confusion. You are not meant to be endlessly soft in a world that often exploits softness, nor endlessly guarded in a world that still contains beauty, sincerity, and moments worthy of trust. You are calibrated, whole, integrated. What once felt like inner conflict was actually refinement. Each disappointment sharpened your discernment. Each betrayal trained your awareness. Each season of isolation taught you how to sit with yourself without flinching. This is why some people feel unsettled around you, and others feel profoundly safe. Those who rely on manipulation sense your boundaries before you speak them. Those who seek authenticity recognize your presence as grounding. You carry both awareness and restraint. You see more than you reveal. You feel deeply without leaking energy. This is not contradiction. It is mastery. It is the ability to remain calm without being passive, kind without being naive, and strong without becoming cruel. Your darkness does not exist to dominate others. It exists to protect your light from being consumed. Your light does not exist to save everyone. It exists to illuminate truth, starting within yourself. You no longer swing between extremes. You respond, you choose, you pause, you observe, and when you act, it is deliberate. Your journey was never about choosing one side and suppressing the other. It was about learning to hold both without internal war, to let compassion and discernment sit in the same room, to allow empathy to coexist with self-loyalty, to stop apologizing for complexity. You are not fragmented. You are finished being divided. This integration is what makes you formidable in silence and calming in presence. You are no longer trying to prove goodness or justify strength. You simply embody both. And that is why your energy feels different now, steady, contained, unmistakably whole. You were never abandoned. You were preserved. Your solitude was not rejection, it was preparation. And now awareness is replacing confusion. If this message resonates, it is because you recognize your own path within it. Comment, I am chosen to affirm what you already know. Like and subscribe, not for validation, but so this message reaches those still questioning their silence. Your season of containment is ending, and what emerges from stillness is always powerful.